What did your town's innocent person do that shocked everyone? Back in the 70s, someone was harassing my great aunt, never married and lived alone. Guy would come up in the middle of the night and beat the doors and windows and scream sexual things at her. She was scared, so my grandfather stayed the night with her for a few days until it happened again. When the pounding started, my grandfather threw the door open. The guy retreated into the darkness but said he had a gun. Fun fact, so did Pappy. He shot what he assumed was the ground in front of the guy, and either the pallets deflected or he actually shot the guy in the legs directly. We'll never know. The man lived, and here's the twist. It was the sheriff. He was married but would get crap-faced and go harass women in the middle of the night. Small town, it's easy to assume he was just another POS, but everyone back then loved this guy. My grandfather ended up being hated by the entire community, except for by the few other women he was bothering. To this day, people with our last name still aren't really well liked there. Most people don't remember why, but that's how small towns operate. Next story. The fellow who owned the local chip shop, pillar of the community, did some wonderful charitable stuff, let prisoners have bags of chips for 10p, kidnapped a teenage-aged girl and kept her as a sex slave in the back of a van till she was discovered 2 weeks later. Next story. She revealed on a drunken night that she has a kink for dating married men and then leaving them once the wife finds out so the husband can get in trouble. Admitted to planting clues to help the wives find out faster. Haven't looked at this innocent girl the same. Next story. A woman died during COVID who everyone thought had a PhD in criminal justice. Turns out, she was wanted for murder under her real name and had done a lot of stuff under an assumed name, including buying a house. Turns out, she told a lot of stories to different people. Next story. My high school had exactly one mature pine tree, desert Southwest state, which the stoners had long claimed as their own, the freak tree. Shade was in short supply on campus. There weren't many cool places to hang out. A couple days before graduation, someone snuck on campus at night and cut it down. Reactions ranged from amusement to outrage, with bewilderment and disappointment being the consensus for most. A substantial reward was offered, but nobody ever got caught. I found out many years later that it was the student body president. Total goody two-shoes, honor student, Eagle Scout, pretty much the last person anyone would expect. He was drunk as a skunk, used a handsaw, still had bandaged blisters on both hands at graduation, but he told everyone he'd burn them in an accident. Next story. Friend's dad used to volunteer at our school. He was the only guy there, but nice to everybody and regularly hung out with all the moms to do stuff for the kids. Our school required parents to spend X amount of time helping out. Very small and tight-packed community in a very rural area. I remember Friday playing with his daughter, one of my friends, and then saying goodbye as her mom went to go pick her up. Found out Monday that he shot my friend and her sister, then turned the gun on himself in a murder self-unaliving. Next story. She started dating a really weird guy and they decided to kill her, still living parent. Can't remember if it was mom or dad. I think dad? I think they were high and did it in an incredibly violent way. The morning after the murder, they left the front door to the house open, and the family dog was found wandering around the cul-de-sac covered in their owner's blood. Next story. Not sure if you would consider him innocent, since there are always rumors about him, but my town's former chief deputy was arrested a few weeks ago. Apparently, he was involved in a huge drug business and was supplying them with details that the police knew so they wouldn't get caught. In return, he was getting $10,000 a month. I live in a small city, about 13,000 people, the majority being farmers. But this is some law and order type crap. Now people are wondering if he was paid off in a lot of his cases, including a woman here who's been missing for over 30 years. Next story. My former high school marching band director got caught and arrested for having 2,000 images and videos of CP. I was in marching band when he was director, so this was a horrible shock. So even though the story is only 2 sentences long, I've read far too many stories similar to this that specifically highlight marching band directors as the ones that have the CP on their phones or computers. So like, what is up with that? Just makes you not want to put your kid in marching band in high school. Next story. Our local sheriff, rural area, was all about fighting drugs in our county. It was election time and a local drug dealer wanted him out, so he devised a scheme to have him killed. He conspired with a deputy of that sheriff, who decided to try getting elected as sheriff also, to hire a young guy who bought drugs from him to kill the sheriff. There is a cookout fundraiser at a local volunteer fire department a couple months before the elections where all the locals running for office would come to smooze the community. The sheriff was there, and the shooter was hidden in the woods on a hill above. He shot and killed the sheriff on the spot, in front of a couple hundred people. He was caught by police and confessed the whole scheme. He was sent to prison along with the deputy and the drug dealer. The guy who did the shooting was from our community and was about 10 years younger than me. He was buddies with our neighbor's kid in their youth and used to come stay the night there often. Next story. Innocent to adults, not to the kids who clocked him. Mr. H was the middle school computer science teacher from the 90s through 2015. All the adults thought he was a normal guy with a loving wife. Well, not only did he watch adult content on the clock with kids in the classroom, he was actively stalking several girls online and trying to groom them. He knew the urban myths and used them to get female students to trust him. Mr. H also was a white knight predator, pretending to protect his victims from online predators and offering himself as a safe resource to those in trouble. Mr. H was in my YouTube comments in 2008 and pretended not to know me. He called out the more flagrant predators and pretended to be my friend. He love-bombed me with gifts as he tried to groom me. I sought him out when I was uncomfortable with what I was going through, not knowing the dude I was scared of was actually him. I deleted all my social media when letters arrived to my house, and I never addressed what happened. In 2015, Mr. H was arrested for CSA and possession of CP. His aliases were revealed, and that's when I realized my computer science teacher had been grooming me and lying to me when I was 11. All the adults were shocked. Nobody suspected this, but looking back, yeah, the signs were there. Next story. I worked with an English guy in France a few years ago. He was a lovely guy, very chilled. He once mentioned that he got money every month from the government back in the UK because of mental health problems. He didn't expand on this. About a year later, I found out that he'd gone back to the UK and had a complete mental breakdown. He started to think that he was in some kind of GTA-style video game, and his mission was to save some kids who had been kidnapped. He decided that these two brothers in their 80s had kidnapped the children, so he beat them to death and then beat another man, also in his 80s, to death. He's now locked up in a secure unit, and I can't really imagine him ever getting out of there. Yet this sounds like, I don't know, maybe schizophrenia? Like, what sort of mental breakdown would prompt him to force his mind into like a simulation like this? Commenters, please educate me down below. It does sound like maybe schizophrenia. Next story. Not my town, but a lodge I worked at in small-town North Carolina had this guy that was very friendly and well-liked. Lots of repeat business because of him. Turns out he was on the run for child abuse / kid adult content stuff and was living there under a fake name. Somehow he got word that the feds were onto him, and he unalived himself by filling a backpack with rocks, walking out into the river in town, and didn't come back up. One day while I was working, this lady came in asking for Mike. My boss was like, let's take a walk. When they got back, she was crying and just got in her car and drove off. Next story. Not really a person, but a couple people owning a business. There was a Lego store in my hometown that had been around for years. They got busted for paying people to steal Lego sets from local stores like Walmart and Fred Meyer's and stuff. When they got busted, they had over 4,000 Lego sets that had been stolen, worth over $200,000. Police caught them when they got a tip from someone who had stolen from them and hadn't been paid what he was promised. When they staked out the location, they saw several shady people going in with Lego sets and leaving empty-handed, and asked some of them, and they were happy to tell the cops that they had stolen and been underpaid for the Lego sets. Next story. My high school principal, super sweet, spunky, and everyone loved her. She was also married, until a couple seniors got into her voicemail, back when everyone had the same voicemail code unless they changed it, and heard voicemails from the married middle school principal and told everyone. Small town, so everyone found out. It was a big deal. Next story. We had a couple that were originally Vista workers, like the Peace Corps, but for domestically disadvantaged areas like Appalachia. The husband and wife were very active in the church and actually sang a song together the morning before, bullcrap, a random intruder of color broke in and killed the wife by hitting her dozens of times with a copper pipe filled with rocks. Bullcrap. Anyway, this story was ridiculous even for the 90s in Kentucky. So the police searched the husband's car and found the bloody murder weapon. His defense at trial was that he took the murder weapon and hid it from the police in his car because he was just so enraged that his wife had been killed, he wanted to kill with the same weapon. There was also a small contingent of people who believed this, but none of them were on the jury, and the guy got life in prison. Next story. Literally robbed a bank. I was best friends with his younger sister. Their mother was the band director at a school in town. They were known for being very studious and quiet. It was a couple years after I'd left town, and we'd fallen out of touch, but it was still shocking. Next story. My church-going religious mother. My mother who won't even say a curse word or drink alcohol. I found out last year that she had been on trial for murder when she was 19. To say that I'm completely shocked is an understatement. Plus a bunch of other family drama with her that I won't get into. I just remember coming across a newspaper article and thinking, no way, this can't be her. Then, as I skimmed the article, little details popped out about how she was pregnant with a baby due in June. My half-brother was born in June. Anyways, she was found not guilty. If she had been found guilty, my siblings and I would not be here today. It just blows my mind. She doesn't know that I know this. Mentally, it F's with me every single day. Next story. My high school biology teacher confiscated a student's phone during class because he was using it and texted a naked picture of that guy's poor girlfriend to himself, then uploaded it on an adult content site. It was tracked back to him eventually and he was fired. This is about a year or so after I graduated. No idea if he was criminally charged or what happened to him. He was an a-hole, and I wasn't really surprised by him doing such a thing, but I was surprised at the sheer stupidity of it all. Next story. In my high school, there was a goody two-shoes kid who wanted to be a cop, even did an internship at the local police station, always followed the rules, and even told on other kids for smoking weed because he thought drugs were evil. A few years after graduating, he went to prison for essaying a toddler. I personally always thought he was a POS, but most people were shocked. Next story. I had a girl that was my best friend in second grade. Let's call her Molly. She was so nice and bubbly. We had sleepovers at her house and hung out all the time. The next year, I moved to a different school, and a couple years later, she moved to a different town in the same state. We followed each other on Instagram, and right out of high school, around 18 years, she posted about having a child. The next year, she had another. The father was never posted, but she always had these adorable curated photo shoots on there, and I was happy for her. A year or so passed, and I get a Snapchat message from a girl that I've been friends with since elementary school but hadn't talked to recently. I open it, and it's a link to an article from our local small-town newspaper. Front page is Molly's mugshot, arrested for essay of a minor in the town she lived in. She's been assaulting a child in foster care. My jaw fell to the floor for a full minute or so. Still have a hard time wrapping my head around how evil she turned out to be. Feel sick for her children and that poor boy. Yeah, this is doubly sick because she probably also played up the struggling single mom angle, like dad abandoned me, so forth and so on, when really it is the total, literal, complete opposite of that. So gross. Next story. Cheerleader and prom queen married the son of the village justice, had 3 kids, became the village clerk, stole $70,000, got caught in the course of a state audit, went to prison for 6 months, got out. Everyone seemingly treats her like nothing ever happened. Next story. I lived in a small apartment building on the same floor as this middle-aged guy. He was usually well-dressed and would greet me in what felt like a calm, genuine way when I would see him in the elevator or down in the garage, where he parked next to my car. One night I was coming home, and I got into the elevator, and he was there with a woman, and they just had a night out together. He introduced her, I said hi to them, and was happy that he seemed to have found someone nice. About a week later, I was getting into my car to start my morning commute, and I saw the man rifling through his trunk looking agitated. I said hi, and he didn't even respond to me, which was super out of character. Later that day, I was home from work, and I got a knock on my door, and it was a couple of police officers. They asked me if I had seen the man, and I mentioned that I had seen him that morning. Turns out, the night before, he stabbed that woman in her apartment like 30 plus times. As she lay dying, she wrote the man's initials in her own blood. After the man murdered her, he came home, cleaned himself up, and went to work in the morning. This is when I saw him down in the parking garage. Turns out, when the police came to my door, they already had him in custody and had arrested him at work, and were asking the neighbors for any details about his actions after the murder, coming home, getting cleaned up and going to work, etc. I was absolutely horrified and shocked and blown away by what had happened. Never would have expected it from this person, given his demeanor and appearance. He sat in jail for a while, awaiting trial, and a couple articles were written about it. Eventually, he went to trial, was found guilty, and sentenced to life in prison. At some point, an auction company seized his apartment and had a day where people could come in and bid on the contents of the entire apartment. It was so strange. An article I read about the case described how this poor woman's family members were concerned about the man she was dating and some aggressive behaviors he exhibited. Sadly, their intuition was right, and he was a monster. She had kids from a previous marriage. It was so heartbreaking to read about her family, to imagine what this horrible loss was like for them. TLDR, met the lady my nice neighbor was dating in my building's elevator. A week later, he murdered her, and she wrote his initials in her blood before dying. Next story. Girl I grew up with and had a pretty good relationship with. She grew up Mormon and got married right out of high school, moved to Washington, became a teacher, and had intimate relations with her 17-year-old student in her home while her husband was away. She basically got a slap on the wrist and sells clay jewelry now. Next story. There is a massive minor trafficking ring in my town. A lot of people were involved, and one of them was a high school friend of mine. One of the victims was my sister. Here's the kicker. The investigation was stalled 3 times as it was discovered that the lead investigators were also involved. Next story. I slept with a guy that later murdered his fiancée that he had 2 kids with. Oh, and I went to high school and was loose friends with a girl that later neglected her baby that died. I guess she left it alone in a hot bedroom during the summer and didn't feed it, and even neighbors would offer to help out, but she refused it. Next story. A homeless woman who seemed harmless sat on the side of the road holding protest signs against the mayor for reasons unknown. When the weather started getting colder, the man brought a blanket to her, and she thanked him by stabbing him in the throat, killing him. And people wonder why I avoid hobos. Next story. The very friendly and much beloved Married with Children elementary school principal was caught soliciting an adult male prostitute during a sting. He lost his job. His wife didn't divorce him. They moved out of town immediately. Next story. A girl who graduated high school a year before me won our town's pageant. Pageant was also affiliated with Miss America at the time, so it was a big deal. She was a star athlete, excellent student, etc. She ended up being forced to resign as the winner. She had been working a side job where she would wrestle and such in lingerie. The videos were then sold online. This went against the Miss America's brand morality clause. Next story. My high school math teacher of 2 years, junior and senior. He had worked at the school since it was built in the 90s. He was known to be very passionate about teaching math, and I remember him fondly because I struggled. But he would be patient with me and even danced around and clapped when I got stuff on my own. He also had been the coach of the girls' volleyball team for years. A year after I graduated, he was outed for selling alcohol to minors, as well as having inappropriate pictures he would take of his team without them knowing. Despite all the evidence, a lot of parents rallied around him, but he did end up losing his job. Not sure what happened after that, as my town has purged anything about it online, because that's what they do with anything scandalous that happens. Next story. Small town, farm town, USA. A girl in my high school senior class. All around goody-goody in the running to be valedictorian, sports star, soccer, basketball, and track. All of the teacher's favorites. Wealthy family, all of that. Well, like 3 weeks before we were all about to graduate, her and her older brother went around and held a bunch of gas stations at gunpoint. I think they hit 2, and didn't shoot anyone, just threatened the clerk with a pistol and asked for money. Then, when they got to the third one, the cops were already privy, and they got caught mid-robbery. At some point, one of them ended up shooting the gun at the cops. I don't remember what all the charges were, and the sentencing ended up being. I'm sure because she was still in high school, they went on easier on her, but yeah. Needless to say, she missed graduation. Yes, my hometown of roughly 7,000 was scandalized. Next story. My pediatrician was quite famous in my town for all the advances he fought for our local healthcare. He was practicing there for decades. He was a funny, kind gentleman. He delivered my youngest brother, and he was supposed to deliver my sister's kid. He got caught in a police sting trying to buy a 5-year-old for sex. My mom cried when she found out. Me and my siblings literally grew up with him as our doctor. Next story. Girl I grew up with was pretty shy, but very sweet and gentle. She had very religious parents. After high school, she got pregnant, but hid it all while still living with them. She ended up having twins at home and must have had a mental breakdown. She either drowned or suffocated them both. She pled insanity, but it wasn't accepted, and she was sentenced to life in prison. I think she must have lost her mind temporarily because she really was such a sweet person. I went to church and Christian school with her, and her parents were probably the most conservative Christians at either. I'm sure that played into it. Maybe she thought that her entire family and social structure would disown her if they found out she got pregnant out of wedlock. Tragic all around. Next story. Nicest guy in the world lived down the street from me growing up. He was truly a warm, friendly man. Claim to fame, us neighborhood kids would find old fishing lures on the beach, and he would buy them from us. Several years later, he planned the murder of his business partner and tried to make it look like a car accident, but botched it badly. Went to prison and was shivved or such a while later and died in prison. It was shocking for our small Midwest town. Next story. It was not my hometown, but the first college I went to in the Midwest. It was a very conservative school. I had a literature professor who was really cool and super progressive. I got along with her because I wasn't from the Midwest, and she really liked my take on stuff. It was the only A that I received that year. She was an arsonist and got busted for lighting fires on campus. Next story. There is a kid at my oldest son's school. Seemed like a nice enough guy. Came to a couple of birthday parties at our house back in the day. He essayed and murdered a developmentally disabled teen girl not long after graduating high school. Now he's in prison for life. I'm still, what the F? Next story. My 8th grade science teacher got busted for using students to produce CP. One of the guys was a neighbor. SD it, F'd him up. Teacher did his time, released, and now has Facebook with people interacting with him. I had this guy for classes and extracurricular stuff. Well, if he's on Facebook with people interacting, I don't think there's anything wrong with continuing to remind the world what he went to jail for. That is sick and should never be forgiven. Next story. Beloved high school French teacher was grooming and sleeping with a 15-year-old student. Wife also knew about it and had walked in on them multiple times. Student ended up in an institution for a year after a self-unaliving attempt and then returned in 12th grade. Truly sad all around. Next story. When I was in high school, the quarterback of our football team my senior year, a fellow classmate, was one of the sweetest guys in class. Kind to literally everyone, made people feel included, especially those who weren't popular. Overall, great guy. A few years later, we had both gone off to different colleges. He went somewhere in the Midwest to play football. Our junior year of college, I heard from a close friend that he was back in our hometown after being found strung out on meth and lots of painkillers in the middle of the night, firing a shotgun on someone's farm property. He had done so many drugs that he had an advanced level of brain damage. He had to relearn some motor skills, and he was, and as far as I know, still is, unable to work or do much independently. He's moved back in with his parents and will be living like that for the foreseeable future. I've been graduated for about 4 years now, so it's been approximately 5 years of this for him. Very, very sad story, and it makes me wonder about if there was something behind his friendly persona in high school. Next story. The high school music teacher was in a weird medieval sex thing with one particular family who had several girls. Each girl would get first chair in jazz band. If you know anything about the school music festival scene, you know this can mean major scholarships. People get mean about it. Band politics are nasty. I just quit from the bullcrap drama, long before I knew underage sex grooming was also a part of it. Keep in mind, this was the mom grooming them into this first. She was in a side piece thing with the band teacher. It blew up after I graduated. The dad divorced the mom, the wife of the teacher divorced him, and his own daughter, who is friends with my sister, stopped speaking to him. I believe the youngest girl dodged it. The others went on very prestigious music scholarships. The teacher was not fired because our band was famous and the teacher was legendary. He eventually quit. No charges, no jail, nothing. Just 3 or 4 girls with Hollywood-style trauma. This was in a famous resort small town in California. F-band. I took so many cooler electives after I quit that crap, with cool teachers. Oh, and our chemistry teacher groped girls. Next story. High school history teacher and volleyball coach. Turned out he was having sex with underage girls. Hated that F for telling me I didn't know how the A-bomb was detonated over Hiroshima during my oral report on it. A-hole thought you detonated an A-bomb by dropping it on the ground. Next story. My town is a massive city, but one particularly bad incident that comes to mind is I was standing in line for a burrito and looked up at the TV to see the mugshot of a very familiar face from elementary school arrested for murder. The shock was that the guy who did it was the son of my school social worker, who was the absolute sweetest lady, and he was raised so well by her. Never could have expected that from him, but he fell in with the wrong crowd and voila, committed murder with them. Next story. 2 separate incidents at the same park. I played baseball at Mahoney Park in Hamilton, Ontario, and anyone who did in the 90s is probably aware of what happened with the old guy who looked after the park and organized the equipment daily. He was really well liked until some kids made allegations that turned into charges, and he was gone from the park after that. He was there for years though, and it was big news in the area when it happened. I swear the park atmosphere changed after that and was never the same since. Shortly after that, a kid from my school's dad, who was the president of the park and handled the treasury, got charged for embezzlement and had to pay back almost $100K to avoid jail, and he went from neighborhood hero to villain instantly. Next story. Not as shocking as most of the other cases people shared here, but it's different enough that I think it's still interesting. So I grew up in a small village of less than 300 people, which means everyone knows each other. So my mom worked at the bank with this woman who had a husband and 2 kids, a boy and a girl. Both the kids were in the same school as me, but a few grades down, and one of my classmates would have been their cousin and the niece to that couple. Well, they would go to Mexico quite often, and they made friends with this American guy who ended up moving to the area. I live in Alberta, Canada. Everyone thought things were fine. A few years later, the father and the son get into a car crash due to bad winter conditions and end up dying. Very shortly afterwards, the American guy ends up moving in with the widowed wife and they get married. Apparently, they had been having an affair for years. Even before he moved to Canada, they hook up in Mexico. So that was a little bit of a shocker there. But that's not the end of the story. Just the first twist, because a few years after that, the widow gets into a car accident herself and ends up hitting a moose, so she dies as well. Now, all that's left of her family is the daughter who's living with her American stepfather. Now, fast forward a few years. By this point, I've graduated from high school, but his daughter is still in high school. But do you remember how I mentioned my classmate was a cousin to this girl? Well, apparently my classmate's father, which would be this girl's uncle, had been filling out his tax returns, saying that his niece was now a dependent of theirs and was living with them, and he was doing it for years. He was a well-respected member of the community, and his business was buying and selling fertilizer and other chemicals to the farmers in the area, so he knew a lot of people. But all that changed when a bunch of Canadian Revenue Agency agents showed up at his door and started asking where his niece was that was supposedly living with him. So he ended up being charged with tax fraud and hit with a hefty fine. So that ended up shocking a lot of people. Next story. A guy a bit older than me lived with his grandfather and grandmother. He was around 18 and his grandfather allowed him to wash and tend to the car. He spent hours polishing it. In general, he was very quiet and nice, not like any other teenagers. So he met a lady and decided to take her to the seaside, and his grandfather denied him his car. He killed his grandfather and then his grandmother too, so that she wouldn't call the cops on him. He left with his girlfriend in the said car. In a week or so, the neighbors noticed the smell. He was arrested and I think got like 15 years in prison. I've moved since, but I'm terrified by the thought that he's released and probably living in his grandparents' apartment. Next story. We were classmates. He was the sweetest boy everyone knew, an absolute social butterfly. He was on the spectrum, but everyone still loved and accepted him anyways. He remembered every name, greeted everyone when he saw us in the hallways, always had such a big smile and a skip in his walk. This guy was a complete ray of sunshine. Even one day, when he was missing, the entire community got together to find him and make sure he got home safe. I left for 4 years to complete my degree, and when I came back, I learned from a friend who stayed that he got really into hard drugs. Shortly before graduation, it started. Got so bad he didn't finish school. He's been in and out of prison now, struggling to stay clean. It's a damn shame. I really miss him. We'd have some of the coolest conversations about hypotheticals in the universe. He would have been an amazing writer. Next story. Guy whose family was a pillar of our church. His grandfather was one of the founders, always threw his weight around to bully people into what he wanted. He was super conservative and pretty bigoted, but he made sure our moderately liberal church hired a conservative pastor and drove out all the liberal people / converted the church to a more conservative denomination. It was horribly scarring to see him stand up in a congregational meeting and scream at my 90-year-old grandmother that he was a heretic for wanting to study what the Bible says about homosexuality. Granny was very liberal and ahead of her time. The church split around gay marriage. Well, wouldn't you know, he was caught by a predator chasing YouTuber who catfished him into believing he was meeting up with a 10-year-old boy for sex. It's all on camera. He left town when the police got involved in utter disgrace. It's always projection, y'all. I mean, how is he just allowed to leave town in disgrace? Shouldn't he be arrested for this? Just saying. Next story. When I was in high school, there was a girl everyone called the Body, because she, well, had an amazing body. Like Sydney Sweeney level. She was obviously very popular and was captain of the volleyball team. She was a grade below us and my friends. A few of my friends and I ended up going to college on the other side of the state, about 5 hours away. One day, me and my friends were standing outside the one dorm room of ours when the body walked by, but she was holding hands with the shop teacher and intermittently kissing him. We looked at each other and we were like, did we really just see that? It was so completely random. Later on, we learned that there had been some sort of high school volleyball competition and that she had told the rest of the team she was going to drive there separately instead of taking the bus like the rest of the team. They must have figured no one would see them because of how far away it was, and they were going separately. My one friend was dating a girl back home still that was a senior in the same class with her, so it got out and the teacher was fired. And his life basically blew up as he was married with kids. His marriage ended and his kids wanted nothing to do with him. Next story. About 1,000,000 years ago, I went to a very evangelical church in our town. Big congregation, lots of emphasis on living the gospel, etc. The local police had a crackdown on curb crawlers, men driving through the red light area to pick up prostitutes, and printing the names of the ones they arrested in the local paper. The very prominent in the church, high-powered lawyer and his wife didn't come back to our church after the first wave of names were printed. Next story. One of those obnoxiously religious ladies. She was holier than thou and talked down to you because you didn't walk with the Lord like she did. When her 2 kids were teenagers and just about out of high school, she got pregnant. Problem was, her husband had a vasectomy. Turns out she was banging the church youth pastor. Her husband forgave her and raised the baby as his own. Next story. Was family friends with another family through sport. They moved away to another state, smaller town, and I never knew why. He was older than me, and my sibling was friends with him. Later on in high school, turns out he was a horror fan. He and a friend killed a classmate of theirs by turning off their power when they were home alone and stabbed the person to death like 30 times, both spending life in prison. Ended up moving out of the major city area because he was having problems and parents thought a smaller town would work out for him. Looking back, I think my sibling saved me once or twice from his psychotic breaks. Next story. A special needs kid I went to high school with was semi-famous in town for bringing a stereo and dancing out at one of the busier intersections in town. Generally well-liked guy, super down-to-earth and friendly, always down to chat or show someone how to dance along for a few minutes. He danced for hours at a time, multiple days a week. He recently got arrested for bestiality. Next story. At 16, she was babysitting and let the kid put a metal fork in a microwave. She let him do it so he would get in trouble. It destroyed the microwave and part of the house. I'm pretty sure she did it herself on purpose and blamed the kid. She's a teacher now. Next story. I guess 3. First one was a youth Sunday school teacher and worked in book sales. When his wife was pregnant, he had an affair with someone in the college age and younger Sunday school class. Never disclosed whether it was a minor or not. He was asked to leave the church and it was apparently covered up really well because he got a volunteer position teaching kids until a couple years later, they found out about this and asked him to leave. Second was an elementary school teacher at a highly regarded private school in my area. He taught kindergarten. He used to touch the girls in class. I only know this because one of my friends was in this class and was SA'd. When she told her parents, they went to the principal. The principal told them he was a well-regarded teacher and wouldn't fire the guy. Her parents were somehow convinced by the guy it would negatively impact my friend, so they never pressed charges or even forced her to be removed from his class. He taught there until he retired. She was later SA'd again when she was older and wouldn't tell her parents because they ended up blaming this original incident in kindergarten on her. She was convinced the same thing would happen. I found out this story years after it occurred in college when my friend kept insisting she needed to have sex with some random dude. I couldn't figure out why she was so obsessed with it until she told me she had never had sex on her own volition and explained who it was. I could never even look her mom in the face again after I heard her mom had allowed all this to happen. There's a lot of crappy people in this story, but the only one that was innocent was the kindergarten teacher. Third was a young Spanish teacher, super nice guy that appeared completely normal and healthy. Didn't show up for class one Monday morning, nowhere near a holiday. Last seen the Friday before. Students researched, and apparently he was arrested on Monday in Miami for DUI. We weren't in Florida, but released on bail. 3 days later, his death was announced and the family wouldn't release the cause. It was disclosed he had a substance abuse problem. No one knows the full story, but obviously a lot was going on if a guy randomly takes off, is found super drunk, and dies under mysterious circumstances, all when he's supposed to be teaching a class and within the span of a week. Next story. He self-unalived by police. He was 17 and effing around with K2, which is old school bad weed by today's metrics, and engaged with his ex-girlfriend's father, who was a local police chief, in order to bait police into a chase. I don't know why the confrontation occurred. He ended up driving the wrong way on the interstate as part of a high-speed chase and died when he crashed into a construction vehicle on the shoulder. R.I.P. Charlie, you were the kindest upperclassman on the wrestling team when I was a mere bullied freshman. Next story. Oh, I have two. The tiniest girl in the drama department in my high school hid that she was pregnant until the day she went into labor, at 16. She was a super overachiever, dropped out to focus on the baby. I saw her a year later and she was clearly losing her mind. Definitely not innocent, but the town I grew up in, Lafayette, Louisiana, had a KKK show on the open access station in the 80s and 90s. 3 people in their Klan outfits. A decade into the show's running, it was revealed that the head of the show, the Imperial Wizard or whatnot, was married to a black woman the whole time. We only found out because she filed for divorce saying she couldn't take the racism anymore. Ain't that some crap? Was her cooking just really great or something? He probably could have left the cooking joke out, but yeah, that's a pretty wild story. Next story. He fell in love with a beautiful woman who was recently split from her abusive husband. He even supported her in the final steps of leaving what she described as a horror story, except it wasn't. She was the abusive one. She wound up scapegoating him and using him as leverage to coerce her husband into giving her money, and then she left town. She had dragged both these men through the mud, ruined their reputations through rumors and manipulating their friends. She was a con artist and a horrible person. Next story. A guy who would go out of his way to help others in the area was found guilty of possessing thousands of CP pictures over a 20-year period. I used to serve him often in the store I worked at. We used to have his aunt call up for an order as she was elderly, and then he would collect it. I always got an odd feeling around him, but I couldn't figure out why. He seemed really nice, and now I know why. We were all disgusted. Next story. We had a cop who had multiple citations for bravery. He was arrested on child-adult content charges and imprisoned. He then left the country for, predictably, Thailand. He later returned to look after his wife, who's pretty ill with a degenerative disease. It's a small town, so pretty audacious. Naturally, he retained his full pension. I just don't know how he has the front to walk down the street. Next story. Long story short, there is a fella people used to slag off for being a bit silly and innocent. Some people were just scummy with the insults towards him. Anyway, years later, he happens to be back in town for something. He's now a multimillionaire, drives an S-Class Merc, etc. He left the town/parish and started up his own business. I looked it up since. Funny thing is, he employs around 100 people. These are jobs the town could have had, but the sad sacks just had to have their jokes. Next story. Guy I knew from church and school, typical quiet kid, was bullied for being a little overweight. Nice guy, but he got into hard drugs, and the details are sketchy on why, but he killed his mom in her house. He crashed out, moved in with her, was arrested a few times for breaking into his neighbors' houses to steal and sell crap for drug money. Really sad. He was legitimately a good, kind, soft-spoken person, but the drugs really effed him up. Next story. 2 teens came upon a handicapped woman washing her car at 2 a.m., kidnapped her and stole her car and murdered her with a pocket knife and drove around with the body until the police tried to stop the car. At that point, they took off, then bailed and ran on foot. Cops caught the monsters. Shocked the town. Next story. I can finally tell this story. Town of about 30,000 in Illinois. There's a guy in town who everyone knows is an arrogant ass. We'll call him K. His father had gone to prison in the 80s for savings and loan fraud, but the money had never been recovered. The son started out as a car salesman, but magically ended up owning a bunch of land on the north side of town and developing it into a subdivision, as well as purchasing himself a bar. K always used to tell people he had his dad's stash buried somewhere. Keep in mind, this money was a lot of people's life savings, etc., but that doesn't really matter for the story. I'm just painting the picture. So Kay ends up bringing a teenager in to help around the bar after closing. Keep in mind, this is like a 17-year-old boy, but people that knew him didn't think it was odd, and he was tight with the police, so no one said anything. He was telling people that he was mentoring the kid because he was from a troubled family, having issues, etc. This goes on for a few years. One day, I'm at work and people start talking about Kay's house caught on fire last night. Then it gets crazier. They put out the fire and found Kay's body. He had been stabbed to death and then bashed with a hammer, and then his body had been set on fire. Turns out the kid Kay had been mentoring was the killer. Kay had groomed him and had been essaying him and giving him money for the past few years. The kid had gotten into drugs. They had argued that night, and when Kay wouldn't give him money, he snapped and killed him. They found him driving the victim's truck that morning, still covered in blood. Next story. My parents live in an upper middle class building, and the community there like to be respectable and respected, and most are elderly retired people. One day my mom heard a big bang late at night, but assumed someone dropped something heavy or broke something. Turns out one of the old men shot his wife with a rifle through the bathroom door as she was hiding from him. It had been going on for years, and no one suspected a thing. Next story. Bookstore owner still using his position in my small mountain town to groom and assault both young boys and girls, but his friends are famous actors, celebrities in NYT, etc. Hyper-intellectual writers who don't believe the low-income, non-intellectuals he assaults. He will get out ahead of his victims and attack anyone in court with frivolous harassment filings, so they have to spend money on legal defense or representation and not focus on holding him accountable. He's actually been under investigation for felony child grooming, that I know of, but intimidated the child, so they didn't have the case. The cops know, but without people coming forward or believing victims, he's still essaying. 15 plus years after coming to our town. Every time I see his business elevated by national media or a celebrity figure, I cringe. Good people give him legitimacy and have no idea. He uses classes, workshops, etc. at his store and org to groom and recruit. Privileged classes simply can't believe he's a predator/essayer because he does an assault in his social class. It's unbelievable, but it's not anything anyone ever does anything about. He's out there traumatizing lives while his rich and influential friends toast him at their dinner parties. The reason folks like him and Cosby, Epstein, etc. don't get caught is not that no one knows. It's probably because folks simply like him more than his unknown victims. Tale as old as time.